Shalom. First and foremost, giving all honor, glory, and worship unto Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rachal Korash. Double honors unto the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and greetings and salutations unto Achim, upholding the testimony of Yahweh Shai in truth and sincerity. And this lesson will be entitled, Why Did the Messiah Flee into Egypt? Or what did I title it? Why did the Messiah go to Egypt? It's going to be titled somewhere along those lines. And how do I say? Well, you know what? I'll start off with prophecy. I'll let the scriptures speak. One, in fact, indeed, it was prophecy that the Messiah would go into Egypt and return out of Egypt into the land of Israel. I'm going to start with Hosea. And you see the fulfillment in Matthew. This is going to be a quick lesson. But Hosea chapter 11, verse 1. When Israel was a child, then I loved him and called my son out of Egypt. Now, the scripture, you must understand that many of these prophecies are 2 to 3 to 4-fold. A lot of times they're twofold, 2 to 3-fold. It's layers, okay? Now, from a secular historical point of view, yes, the Israelites were brought out of Egypt from the hand of bondage of the Egyptians in the, second millennium, all right? Roughly 2000 BC, 2500 BC, more so. All right, this did take place, and this is speaking about that. But from a prophetic lens, and you must understand when you're dealing with the scriptures, you have to understand the testimony of Yahweh Shai is the spirit of prophecy. And from a prophetic lens, that son that came out of Egypt is the Messiah, Yahweh Shai. He himself is the Son of God. He is the beloved. When the angel came down to John the Baptist, he told him that when the Messiah was being baptized by John the Baptist, he said, "This is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased." All right. And this Hosea 11 correlates with that. It correlates with Matthew, the 2nd chapter that I'm about to get. So firstly, we must understand it was prophecy. All right. Now let's go to Matthew chapter 2, starting at verse 13. It says, and from a background of this, Herod of the Herodian dynasty, he was seeking to kill the Messiah as a baby because he had found out that he had been born via the wise men from the east. And so his plan was to murder the boy. But Joseph was made privy via the angel, I believe it was Gabriel, who instructed him to remove and depart from Bethlehem, where the Messiah was originally from and born, into the land of Egypt. So I'll read Matthew chapter 2 and verse 13. And when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeareth to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise and take the young child and his mother, which is Mary, and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word. For Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night and departed into Egypt. All right. So Yahushua, for a time in his youth, he lived in Egypt. Why? Because of prophecy. Why else? Well, let's look geographically. Let's look at it from a geographic perspective. Why didn't he go here? Why didn't he go there? Well, because geographically, Egypt borders Israel. Egypt is the next land over. All right? It borders Israel. And so geographically, it makes all the sense of the world to go over into Egypt. So from a geographic perspective, yes. All right. Now let's look at it from the perspective of phenotypes, right? Now, a lot of times you might hear individuals say, well, the Messiah went to Egypt because he was black and he wanted to blend in. And from a broad brush perspective, that is correct. But in actuality, to consider all the factors, just to say that in itself is more details to it, is more to that. Because at this point of time, we are in, what are we? We're in single digits AD. At this time, the land of Egypt is a metropolis. It was an international land where a land of trade, a land of where many different ethnicities actually lived in. We're speaking of single digits AD. At this period, the land of Egypt had been conquered or conquest by the Babylonians, by the Persians, Cambyses, if I'm not mistaken. For hundreds of years at this point, by the Greeks, the Hellenistic period. So during and as well as the Romans. So by this time, the land of Egypt was far from just simply a black place, if that makes sense. There had been Greek colonies in Egypt for hundreds of years at this period. There were many different nations, including Edomites, which are Greeks. There was a lot of white people who lived in Egypt at this time period. So for an individual just to simply say, well, just go into the landmass of Egypt to blend in, yes and no. And I of course, I just explained why no, because of you're dealing with a post-Hellenistic period of Egypt. And yes, and that does make sense. It is true that he could blend in because you had something called Israelite settlements or Jewish or Israelite colonies, or I'll say settlements, that had been in Egypt for centuries at this point. And I'm going to bring out some information on that. Let's see here. Right? So it says And I typed in Jewish villages in Egypt during time of Jesus, which we know his name is Yahushua. During Yahushua's time, Jewish or Israelite communities thrived across Egypt, not just in villages, but in major centers like Alexandria, Fayum, Leontopolis, Oxyrhynchus, and Thebes, with evidence from names Abraham, Solomon, and multiple synagogues showing widespread presence in various towns, making them a significant non-Greek population alongside Greeks in Ptolemaic and Roman Egypt. So there were many Israelite communities in Egypt. All right. And so when Yahushua, or when the Messiah, the Son of God, when Joseph took him as a lad, as a child to Egypt, he was able to blend in, not necessarily because he was blending in with dark Egyptians, but because there were large Israelite communities and cities and populations in the country of Egypt. You know, he had cousins, he had his family, he had family, distant family, he had family in Egypt. You know, he had Israelites, he had Judites, it was Levites, Benjamites, they living in Egypt, large communities of them. So for Yahushua, it doesn't say specifically what city he went to. But for instance, a large city like Alexandria, for Yahushua to go to Alexandria, there were tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands I'm not sure of the population of Alexandria right now. So for a safe number, we'll say tens of thousands. That's a light estimate. And that's just the city of Alexandria, right? Not talk about the outskirts, because they might give you a population, but that population might not include the outskirts, the greater Alexandria area, you know? But there were thousands upon thousands of Israelites in different communities in Egypt. So it was easy for him to blend in amongst other Israelites. You know, it was easy for Yahushua to blend in amongst other Israelites because there were large Israelite communities in Egypt during the time of the Messiah. And you can see the information of the large Jewish or Israelite populations in some of these major cities of Egypt during the single-digit AD period, is which Yahushua went. And you can see the textual evidence, archaeological evidence from synagogues. Demographics, as you can see, it says Jews were described as the most numerous foreign group in Egypt after the Greeks during this period. So it was a large population of Jews in Egypt. So when Yahushua went into Egypt, he blended in amongst the other Jews, which not only did they look like him, but they were acclimated in the same culture, same language, you know. And so it's very easy for him to blend in different populations in different cities. And Herod, another point I'll add, Herod did not have jurisdiction over Egypt. Okay? I believe Egypt at this time was a Roman province, but the Herodian dynasty only had specific jurisdiction over Judea. It wasn't the Roman Empire that was actually seeking Yahushua. It was Herod, where it speaks about the dragon to seek to devour the woman's child. That dragon, yes, Herod was a figure of the Roman Empire, which in itself, yes, it was Rome, but in actuality, it was Herod specifically. And Herod did not have jurisdiction over Egypt, so he wasn't able to go in Egypt and hunt for a baby, hunt for children. You know, the way he slaughtered those children in Judea, he was able to do that because he had jurisdiction over Judea. He would have no form of jurisdiction over the Israelites in Egypt to slaughter the Israelites in Egypt in that fashion. You know, when he slaughtered all the babies from 2 and under, he wouldn't have any form of jurisdiction to do that massacre in Egypt because there were other Roman officials that were over those provinces, and a lot of times these officials did not like each other. They didn't see eye to eye. They actually hated and envied each other. You know, it even tells you about, I think, was that Pilate? I think it was Pilate and Herod, or it might have been, and that's a different Herod. That's, at this point, I think that's the son of the Herod we're talking about now, at the Yahushua's crucifixion during that time period. I think it was Pilate and Herod. It tells you at one point, it was one Roman official in Herod. It tells you that they didn't like each other, but during the time of Yahushua, when he was crucified, they kind of start being buddy, you know. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I just felt like it would be fitting to, add to the beautiful points of edification that Akim have already made and established concerning Yahushua going into Egypt, and just, add a little bit more detail to what has already been established. So I do hope this lesson was edifying. I'm going to give all praises, honor, glory, and worship unto Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Rachakodash. Double honors unto the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and salutations unto you, Akim, Shalom, and keep the faith.